There are moments in life where you don't realize you're standing in the middle of a story until much later. It's after the dust settles, when the body heals, and the heart finally has courage to look back. This is one of those stories. It begins in a city framed by mountains. It was a place that gave us a sense of belonging, but it arrived quietly and really almost without our noticing. San Pedro wasn't just a chapter in our lives. It was a pilgrimage. And it was one we didn't even realize we were taking. Like all pilgrimages, it held beauty and challenges, and it also held a great deal of unexpected grace. Those were moments that revealed me to myself. Today I want to tell you that story. Trust me, this is not a travelogue. I won't bore you with a list of events, but I am going to tell you about a journey. It was a journey that began with wonder, moved through crisis, and unfolded through connection, and it ended in a way that I could have never predicted. This is episode 10, and I'll be right back. When we first arrived in San Pedro, everything felt new. Not in a touristy sense, but in the sensory sense. The mountains are really the first thing you notice there. They aren't a backdrop. They are a presence. They shaped the light, the mood of the city. And the morning light there. It felt soft, almost ceremonial. And then there was the construction. Right outside our window, the skeleton of Torre Luna was rising, floor by floor, week by week. 2 cranes moved. They moved there with a kind of choreography, lifting steel, shifting concrete, and just painting the skyline with motion. The sound of that became part of our days. The constant hum of machinery, clank of metal. It was the rhythm of a city that was building itself in real time. Below all of that was a pool, beautiful swimming pool, that bright, impossible blue that was separated by just our glass barrier. It was a strange contrast. There was serenity in the foreground, and I guess we could call it creation in the background. I didn't know it then at the time, but that contrast would become a metaphor for our entire time in Mexico. Frida loved that window. She'd sit on the couch watching the world rise around her. The mountains in the distance. Oh, I got a lot of pictures of her doing just that. And the cranes would be moving like giant mechanical birds. And she really grounded us in those early days. She was calm most of the time and she was present. And she had that curiosity. I had it too. I think we all had it. And there were our first outings, the cafes, the bakeries, small shops, and the parks. Everything felt like discovery. There was so much possibility there. And there was one place that became especially important that we nicknamed Frida Boylan Park. This was a small park. It was not like a public park. It was just there, some green space, if you will. I'd take Frida there in the mornings with the air still cool and those beautiful mountains still holding the morning light. It was there, I guess, where I first felt the rhythm of the city. Yeah. I started to feel like I belonged. Again, and those early days there were just absolutely full of wonder. Every turn, it was like everywhere you looked, it was something new and fascinating. It wasn't my first time in Mexico, but it was my first time living there. But then, this thing just happened suddenly. Edu woke up in the middle of the night with this incredible abdominal pain. He had difficulty breathing. It was that severe. We didn't know what it was, and it just was escalating quickly. We rushed to the hospital. It's another story in itself. But I found myself navigating a city I barely knew with my Spanish still very clumsy, almost non-existent. My fear was rising. And the diagnosis came pretty fast. He had a severe gallbladder attack, and he had to have it removed immediately. So there it was, emergency surgery. So I remember sitting in that hospital room, watching him drift in and out of consciousness, and I listened to the surgeon explain all the risks. I remember some very real things at that moment. I remember the coldness of the chair and the brightness of those fluorescent lights. Time was kind of collapsing. I wanted to trust this surgeon who was getting ready to perform that operation on my husband, and he spoke very, very well English very well, so that wasn't an issue at all. He explained everything perfectly, and yes, there were risks involved, but the important thing was that the surgery had to take place, and that gallbladder had to come out. So I think that was when the first of many things happened that surprised me. But I went to shake his hand and to tell him, and I did tell him, I'm trusting your hands. I'm trusting your hands. And he grasped my hands in his and said, they're not my hands. They're Jesus' hands. That was a moment. But it was a moment that really reassured me, because I believed him. I really did. That was our first crisis in Mexico, and it was really our first moment of vulnerability. I think that this is one of those reminders that life doesn't pause just because you're in a new place. It goes on as life does. Well, the surgery was successful. There's a whole other story behind that time, and it would take me 20 episodes to tell all of it. But he recovered. It was a relatively short recovery, too. But something kind of awakened in me this message that the pilgrimage that we were on wasn't going to be so simple. And kind of a reminder that beauty and danger often travel together. But the unwanted companion on this journey was fear. And I was trying my best not to go there. I didn't want to be fearful. And the city continued to open itself to us. As Edu healed up, our world there, Monterrey, particularly San Pedro, expanded. Nat was the first person to step into our lives with warmth and ease. What really began as a practical connection quickly became a friendship. Nat is Eduardo's cousin, also from Venezuela, but she had been living in Mexico for some time. She had a way of making us feel seen and welcomed, and totally, for me, understood, because she was my English connection. Also, my first call when the emergency went down that night. Yeah. And she had, her husband and two wonderful daughters. They were bright and curious and full of life. And I have to say, being around them added a kind of lightness to our days. I didn't think I'd been missing that, but I guess I had, that lightness. And then there was Judith, our realtor. Yes, she was our realtor, but she was also became family. She had recently lost her partner of many years, and though we didn't speak about it directly at first, that grief was still fresh. Her daughter was a joy, is a joy. Vibrant, funny, full of personality. Spending time with them felt natural and grounding. Real. We discovered, probably after the first 4 weeks, a building dedicated to health and wellness and healing, and it sat right outside our door. Om Wellness Center was the name, and who wouldn't be intrigued by that name? The building itself, beautiful, surrounded by all of this lush vegetation. Had an atrium 4 stories high that felt absolutely designed for reflection and journal writing, and I did quite a bit of journal writing there. I'd be spending a lot of time there. I just close my eyes and I think about that beautiful setting. It was, I want to say, probably the best place ever in my life in terms of journal writing. I think if there was one ideal place to write in my journal, it was at Om Wellness Center. But the real gift of that place was Monse, our meditation instructor. She had this luminous steadiness and an absolutely grounded presence that made every single session feel like a blessing. So what began as these meditation classes quickly became a friendship with her as well. In fact, we still meditate with Monse, even though now she's in Italy. So thank God for Zoom. Woven through all of this was the food. Monterrey is a city that loves to eat, and given my background, I embrace that wholeheartedly. We found ourselves at some of the best restaurants in the region. We were savoring dishes all the time, even though I did cook, but we ate out a lot. We went to places that were really high-end restaurants, and we also went to the smaller places, the ones that the locals loved. And those places were perfect as well. The food was perfect and served with so much pride. Little by little, these people and places and the routines of daily life, they began to form a circle around us. And that circle, I could say, would be best described by calling it a belonging, feeling like a feeling of belonging, or maybe a circle of care. But it however I can describe it, it was a circle that made the foreign city that this was to me feel like home. Beneath all of it, there was another layer that was forming. Edu's job, the reason that we were in Mexico, it suddenly shifted. His company needed him back in Atlanta, and that was much sooner than expected. So our time in San Pedro would end in May, and that was months earlier than what had been planned, what we had planned for. Then January, at the start of the new year, just a week or so into the new year, I had devastating news from back in Atlanta. My neighbor and my dear friend Milena had passed away suddenly. She was only 41 years old. It was, devastating. Losing her from a distance seemed surreal. It was as though grief had traveled across the borders and found in me that place where I was just beginning to be held and felt like I was part of. And I had additional things going on as well. Threaded through all of this, my ongoing physical limitations started to come back to haunt me. I had unpredictable GI issues, and they were exhausting. And on particular days, they were debilitating. So there were days when I desperately wanted to explore and to join Edu and say yes to all the invitations, but my body just simply wouldn't allow it. And that was disappointing, but it didn't happen too much. It happened infrequently, but these symptoms certainly reminded me that I needed to pay close attention to my health. Once we knew that we had to leave earlier than expected, many things shifted. We had to break our lease, and it could have been financially devastating, but I mean, Edu's company had put us up there in that place, and they absorbed the cost of the broken lease, which was a blessing. But even with that relief, the logistics of leaving were really daunting. We had arrived by car, and we would have had to return the same way, which we planned on doing. But the idea of driving back to the border carried its own set of, frankly, dangerous possibilities. We had Frida with us. We had to travel by vehicle. I mean, while we were there, each one of us took a few trips back to Atlanta, but they were all flying, so that was just not something that was on the table for Frida. She's a large dog, and we couldn't put her through that. But anyway, that idea of making the road trip back again through some territory that's kind of sketchy, it was daunting. And Nat and her husband stepped in without hesitation once again. They agreed to drive us and Frida all the way to Texas. Their generosity still humbles me. So the plan, it was relatively simple in theory. They would drive us to the border, we would rent a car, and would begin the multi-state trek back to Atlanta. But beneath that simplicity was kind of I don't know what you'd call it, an undercurrent of anxiety. It's always kind of laying there just below the surface. We were preparing to leave a place that had held us and challenged us and changed us, and now we were doing it under pressure. And I was still grappling with a return in which I'd never again feel that warm embrace of Milena. And my own body was still unpredictable. There were lots of flags going up, body-wise, for me. By the time we reached those final days in San Pedro, we tried to make everything as uncomplicated as possible. Everything was packed. Transportation to the border was arranged, thanks to Nat and her husband. The keys were in an envelope ready to be handed over, and we were staying at an Airbnb a couple of nights before beginning that long drive back to the United States. I was already imagining myself back in Atlanta on my lanai, tending the garden after 8 months away, cooking in my own kitchen, asking Alexa in English to set the timer. But life, as John Lennon said, is what happens when you're busy making other plans, and boy, does it. All hell broke loose. As my dad used to say, all hell broke loose. And the pain for me arrived very suddenly, and it was sharp, and I mean all-consuming. I've written about pain before. I've blogged about it. I've written many times about pain. Yeah, and that's because I've had moments of significant pain due to physical issues throughout the years. A lot of my writing about it really revolved around the way that A Course in Miracles frames pain, which is that it's in the mind, and that the mind controls the body, and it's not the other way around. But when real, debilitating pain takes hold, nothing else exists. It overrides everything. It becomes the whole world. So it wasn't just a kidney stone. It was a severe kidney infection. The type that can lead to sepsis if left untreated. And I needed surgery. Now, my body was just failing me at the exact moment that I needed it to carry me home. And those mantras, the spiritual tools that I leaned on for decades, they just simply didn't work. I am not a body. I am free. I could see peace instead of this. Those mantras at that point in time felt like gasoline on a fire. I was spiraling into frustration and even shame. After all these years of studying and praying and meditating, why I couldn't rise above that pain baffled me. Why couldn't I transcend it? My ego had a field day with that. It told me I was failing. It told me that I was weak. Yeah, it told me basically to just give it up, give up. But pain, my friends, pain, even the worst pain, is temporary. I have to tell you that for those of you who have never experienced significant physical pain, if there's one takeaway that I would like to give you, because most of us will at some point experience significant physical pain in our lives, and I'm telling you, it's temporary. That's the only comforting words that I can give to you at this time. So when that pain intensity finally ceased, something else rose to the surface. And it was something that had been, circling me for weeks. And that was forgiveness. It's the simple word, forgiveness. And that was followed by another word, which was surrender. Those two words held so much gravity for me at that time. Forgiveness and surrender. I think when I talked about, in another episode, about the idea of forgiveness as it is put forth in A Course in Miracles is very, very different than the traditional Christian approach. So it's not forgiveness in the old religious sense, where someone sins and you magnanimously let it go. No. The forgiveness of A Course in Miracles is really the forgiveness of illusions and misperceptions. It's a forgiveness of the stories we tell ourselves about our own unworthiness. That's the kind of forgiveness that heals because it reveals what is true beneath what we've projected up onto the world. That's a miracle. That really is. Even though I was realizing this, I realized I also had a long way to go with forgiveness. But I also knew that it was the only path forward. A second surgical procedure was scheduled, and the night before, I found myself sitting once again with the thought of death. And I came to some peace in that moment. I really did. Even though I was thinking about all these books back home, I really was. I was thinking of when I was... It's just amazing the things that go through one's mind. I I was thinking I haven't had a real chance to go through all my books, and just one more time I'd like to. It's crazy. Oh, I wondered if I would make it home. I really wondered if this was the end of my story. But I'll tell you that grace arrived. It did. It arrived, and it arrived in the form of people. That's how grace often does arrive in our lives. Lupita, our landlady, who had also become a good friend, surprisingly, she is our landlady. She insisted that we stay in the unit we'd been renting from her, and that we'd already vacated. No charge, no hesitation. Simply beautiful. Nat and her husband stood ready to drive us, Frida included, all the way to Texas, while Judith offered emotional support as she always had. And Eduardo held everything together with a steadiness that still humbles me. It really does. The surgery was successful, the infection began to heal, and our journey back to the United States, though it was long, unfolded without incident. When we finally crossed the border, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. It was relief. Not triumph, and not a celebration, but a relief, just relief. I guess it was more like a quiet return to life, in a way. But as I look back on all of that, I can now see a kind of symmetry. A symmetry of all of it. Edu's crisis opened our time in Mexico, and mine closed it. They were two bookends, holding everything that we lived between them. The belonging and the beauty, all that fear, the generosity, and the growth. San Pedro changed us. It held us. It opened us. And it sent us home different than we were when we arrived. I'll see you next time, my friends.